Does the term private island conjure up images of a secluded beach, tropical cocktails, being delivered by your own private butler, maybe some island music and a cool breeze? Well, after today's episode, you may want to hit the brakes on that vision because we are going to tell you all of the pros and cons of cruise line private islands. Jodi, what do you got going on? Where are you going? What are we doing?
Nothing going on. And this is, so we have a trip planned after Christmas, like the day after Christmas. We weren't really sure on the kids' plans for the summer, so we weren't sure about planning. I mean, obviously we're going to do some trips to Cape Cod. But all this planning for the private islands, and I've been writing my posts about the MSC cruise. I'm thinking maybe I can try to get on a 3-day or 4-day cruise sometime this summer. So we'll see.
Yeah.
No, I don't have anything planned, but I know you have so much going on.
I have, but we were just talking yesterday about how we have Alaska and then we're literally home for 2 days, and we have Bermuda and then we're home for 3 weeks, and we have the British Isles, and then it's nothing, like literally nothing. We have a tentative plan for Barcelona in October, but it's nothing is set in stone past June. And my husband only gets his haircut when we're on a cruise. So I'm feeling like he's going to look a little like Jesus by the end of this year because we've got nothing from June on. He will just have long flowing locks and nothing but complaining from him. But I am excited about our upcoming trips. I have not been to Bermuda before. We're doing Bermuda with Celebrity. And for me, it's a learning at sea cruise. So during the sea days, I will spend 8 hours a day learning about the cruise industry, learning about booking cruises and planning cruises, and learning all of the ins and outs of Celebrity. So I'm really excited about that.
And where do you leave from?
We leave out of New York.
So that'll be interesting to hear because I know that can be a rough route. So, nothing like we were talking before about Antarctica, but I know it can be rougher than the Caribbean. So I'm curious to hear how that goes.
Yeah. So the last cruise we did out of New York was on MSC Maravilla, and we went from New York down to the Bahamas. And we did another one out of Baltimore on Vision of the Seas that went down to the Bahamas. And it was so interesting to me that like on day 2, they were attaching barf bags to all of the railings around. I had never seen that before. I'd never seen it in Alaska, the British Isles. It was like, oh my gosh, we are in for it going down the coast. Yeah. So I am kind of curious. And I also have like a morbid fascination with, the Bermuda Triangle, which may be why I haven't been to Bermuda yet, but the whole Hatteras Island, part of the triangle. I don't know. If I don't come back, Jodi, trudge on, carry on without me.
I mean, we've been to Bermuda flying, which is so easy.
Yeah.
But, and it's beautiful and well worth visiting, but yeah, we'll have to do an episode on that when you return.
I'm praying for good things. I'm praying for pink sand because I'm excited to see it, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Good.
All right, let's sail right into private islands. So let's, first of all, what does that mean, private island? Because I know for you and I, we've done a lot of different cruise lines, and one size does not fit all when it comes to private islands.
Right. So a private island is, obviously an island that is owned or leased by a cruise line exclusively to guests of that cruise line. So you can't fly there and spend an overnight. There's no hotel. There might be staff that lives there, but there's no guests. But when we're talking, we'll also talk about some private destinations on islands, which mean that the island itself isn't private, but this is like a resort that's private to only the guests of the cruise line, during that sailing. So we're kind of using those terms a little interchangeably. But yeah, the cruise line has basically developed this, destination specifically for the people on their cruises.
Yeah, and I kind of just wanted to throw in there what a huge benefit this is for cruise lines because it does conjure up in your head kind of an exclusivity. Like, I'm not just going to be on a public beach with anybody that can stroll on by. It's
Right.
going to be a very private experience. And it's great for the brand. It's great for the cruise lines who are able to say, yeah, we have our own private space. You're going to love it.
Yeah, and it's like you have to go on that cruise line to go there, right? So
Yeah.
it is an exclusivity, but also, very different from like Nassau, which is one of the more popular destinations given the size of the port and just the closeness to Florida. Where, if you're in Nassau, you're going to see cruise ships from every cruise line. But when you go to
Yeah.
these private destinations, typically, but not always, it's just one ship,
Yeah.
one cruise
Yeah.
line, one ship. Obviously, there are a few exceptions, but yeah, it's going to be exclusive.
Yeah. I like the fact that, so you pick your cruise line based on kind of the vibe that you're looking for and the amenities that
Right.
you're looking for. And I think I love the way that it carries over to the private islands. Like if you're sailing on Disney, you want a family friendly environment and you're going to get that on a Disney island. If you want
Right.
like Carnival or Virgin, you're going to find a more upbeat,
Right.
happening kind of thing. So I like that they sort of make the private island so that they carry on the vibe of the cruise line.
Yeah, absolutely.
So which cruise lines have private islands?
So let's see. Disney, since we started with that, Disney has Castaway Cay, which is an island in the Bahamas. And it also has Lighthouse Point, Lookout
Mhm.
Key at Lighthouse Point, which is a destination on an island,
Yeah.
private resort area. It does feel very private islandy though, because you walk out of the ship and do that long walk, but you're not passing the town or anything like
Yeah.
that. Um, Carnival has private island and a new private island.
Mhm.
Um, we were just MSC has uh, Ocean Key, and then they are opening, as we talked about last week, a new destination.
Yeah.
Um, let's see what else. Royal Caribbean has Perfect Day at CocoCay, which is an island with all sorts of activities. Um,
Absolutely.
and I believe Norwegian has one.
Yeah.
And
Norwegian is
then,
great. Turkey.
yeah, and I think you can even see Norwegians from Perfect Day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Virgin, which we talked about, they have a resort on Bimini, which is a little bit different. Bimini's very easy to go to. You just get off the ship and there's like a tram. It takes you to this resort. Um, but what's interesting is that we've also been on a carnival sailing, or a celebrity sailing that went to that
Mhm.
same beach club. And the Virgin
Yeah.
Voyages signage was down and there was new signage up. Food was different, but obviously same destination. Um, that feels very exclusive, even though it isn't, a private island per se.
It really does. It's like a nice insulated space, even though you see going, I mean, you're going past the casino and you're going past residences and stuff like
Right.
that. And then you get to this little section and it's like, oh yeah, this is all ours.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and Celebrity does, some of their ships do also go to Perfect Day.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a new thing over the last year or so.
Right.
So, well, what do you expect to find on a private island? Like, am I bringing everything with me? Beach chairs, umbrellas? Like, what do I need? What am I going to see there?
You are going to see, it's probably what I can say best is like expect some sort of like a beach club type vibe. Maybe like you're staying at a hotel that has a beach. You're gonna find chairs. Um, most of them have umbrellas, or you can rent umbrellas. Most of them have where the food is included.
Hmm.
I think so. So when we went on Celebrity, we did have to pay extra for that beach club,
Yeah.
and purchasing the food was separate. But for all the other ones, just kind of a day at the beach vibe is included. Now, something like Perfect Day at CocoCay or CocoCay, um, there are, it's really, they define it as like you can have your perfect day, and there is just so much to experience, from a water park to a pool, private beach clubs, adult only beach clubs. Now, some of these do come with an additional fee, but if you just want to spend the day at the beach, then you can do that without paying any extra. I
Yeah.
did fail to mention, when I was talking about all the private islands and destinations, Labadee, which is the private destination in Haiti
Hmm.
for Royal Caribbean. Um, Fewer ships visit that destination than Perfect Day, and some of the itineraries have changed based on just the political environment in Haiti and
Yeah.
the safety. But that is a very private, you know, secured area of the island where no one else can access it.
And that's real. That's one of the most beautiful islands I think I've been to. I
Yeah,
didn't expect, I don't know if I knew what to expect going there, but I mean, it was just stunning.
it is. The landscape there, I feel like in that whole island, the Dominican and Haiti, is very different from what you see in the other Caribbean islands with the mountains. Um,
Yeah.
it is a really beautiful place, and it's good to know that Royal Caribbean is doing a good job keeping track of like the general safety in the area. Um,
Yeah.
but back to what we were talking about, some of these islands, they will have like excursions that you can book.
Hmm.
So, you can do things like kayaking, or uh, you know, renting jet skis, renting inner tubes and, flotation devices, snorkeling. Um, there's really all sorts of stuff that you can potentially book for an additional fee. Um, but, you don't have to feel like you have to do something. It's not like when you get off at, you know, a, a, a Caribbean island or a destination like, Cozumel, Costa Maya, where beyond the port, anything you do, you have to pay for.
Yeah. They really make them destinations. I mean,
Right.
they give you everything that you need, and so many activities on some of them. And then like on Ocean Key, if you just want to lay on the beach and chill, it's there. Whatever you want to do, you can do on these private islands.
Right.
So am I going to be disappointed there's not a butler, there's not any kind of real exclusivity because I'm there with thousands of my closest friends from the cruise ship?
Yeah, so it will depend, right, on what you book. For instance, at CocoCay, there is like an exclusive beach club that you can book, and that will have a little bit more of the exclusivity. Um, but you're also not, I've done the excursions in the Caribbean, the cruise ship excursions, where it's like a day at the beach, where the
Mhm.
chairs are all jammed together, and you know, and there's beach vendors, and that's not this. There's a little bit more space. There are plenty of chairs for everyone, but there's also just a lot of room.
Yeah.
So, you don't feel like you're kind of crammed in, at least
Yeah.
for the ones that I've visited. Um, yeah, there's a lot of people, but there's also a lot of room.
And if you want to raise the bar on that exclusive feeling, most of them have cabanas, and there's some sort of, I don't know, some sort of additional services, some sort of exclusive feeling with the
Right.
cabanas.
Right. I mean, cabanas, do range from like the Disney cabanas, which are just awesome and also just like impossible to book.
Yes.
Those are really like cabins almost.
Yeah.
Versus some of them, really are just more like shelter with a little fridge and a little more service. Um, but yeah, you do get more with that, with that extra fee. Um,
Yeah.
but you also don't have to feel like you have to spend that money.
Yeah. That's so true. I do love though, like Royal Caribbean on Perfect Day. There's sort of a range of cabana. Like you
Right.
go to a more simple one, or you go to the one at the beach club that has, like a little plunge area.
Right.
Like
Right.
you can purchase the type of experience that you want.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a cabana at Royal Caribbean on, at Perfect Day, and it was just such a great experience. We had a butler who was so helpful. It was just really it was just like a great treat. Now, if
Mhm.
you book a cabana on that island at the the beach or at the water park, you'll get passes to the water park, but those cabanas, don't feel necessarily as exclusive. They're nice. They're a little closer together than the ones on the beach, but it's a
I
big
think that's why I like it. The Disney ones have that feeling of like you're in this insulated cabana area. Like it's sort of exclusive.
right.
They definitely make it so that not everybody is traipsing through. And,
Right.
they give you, the hammock. It's like an indoor outdoor space, but you don't have to worry about somebody coming up and sitting in your beach chairs or whatever, which I feel like some of the other cabanas, I mean, the beach chairs are several feet away from your cabana. So,
Right. Well, we did have that one cabana where I felt like we kind of had a man just seem to join us in our day.
yes.
His beach chair just kept creeping back, which was
And his cigar smoke kept creeping
right.
back.
And then he smoked a cigar, which was frustrating.
Yes.
And so, yeah, there are definitely pros and cons to spending that money, but yeah, the Disney ones, there's a reason why those are traditionally booked out by like the concierge guests only, because those are great.
They're spectacular. So we talked about like the shore excursions and some of the activities. What kind of things are maybe included, and are they pretty much the same across the board? Like, CocoCay has this big water park, which is an additional fee, but what do the other islands have that may be similar?
Yeah, so at Labadee, they have some inflatables. They have the mountain coaster, which is really fun and very unique, and a zip lining experience. No, you would like it. It was less scary than the MSC World America swing.
I was just going to ask, is it less scary than that swing? Because it looked terrifying.
It is. No, it was not terrifying at all. And you control it, so you can slow it down if you want. I mean, no,
I'd have a line of traffic.
Yeah.
For those from Philly, it would have been the Schuylkill Expressway behind me because I'd have been inching my way down this hill.
Like Disney, one thing that Disney does that they don't all have is that Disney has its entertainment. Like, so at Castaway Cay, basically your crew on Castaway Cay is your crew on the ship. So, your entertainment crew is running different kinds of events. Your kids club crew is running the kids club, because there's only one ship at a time there. It's run by, your servers are serving in the buffet. And
the kids club might be the best part of the Disney islands because it is so awesome to be able to get off the ship and put your little ones at the kids club where there's going to be a ton of activities, and you can have a few minutes to read your book or put your feet in the sand.
Right. And if they've been on the ship for a few days, like they may already know kids in the kids club.
Yeah.
On the other islands, like, Ocean Cay, they have a conservation area that just opened in April when we were there, where you can learn about their conservation efforts. And that's, very walkable from the ship. Towels are something like, depending on the cruise line, you'll want to bring off the ship, or just, at Disney, you take it as you're walking off. At MSC or Royal Caribbean, you'll want to bring the towels that you've gotten on the ship with you. Obviously sunscreen, those things aren't provided. But yeah.
I like the little float thing that Virgin does.
Oh, the float
pool in the afternoon with the blow up float.
Right. They do like a blow up inflatable pool party with a DJ who's always good.
Yeah.
Yeah, they always have great music. And Disney will have music too. It's just that the island's big, and so you're going to need to look at your app to see like what's going on the island.
Yeah. It all sounds amazing. What are the downsides? What am I not going to love about a beach club?
Well, so I think that they're great and I love them. But if you are, maybe trying to get a little more of the culture of the area. If you're thinking like, oh, I'm going to, I want to go on a food tour and learn, like the food you're going to get on these islands is like a beach barbecue. You're not going to
Mhm.
get like the delicacies of the area necessarily. Um, you're not going to get like the locals, especially something like Disney, where it's really the people who work on the ship who are, you know,
Yeah.
um, so you're not going to necessarily get that cultural experience. I know some of the islands have really tried to bring more of that. So, uh, Lighthouse Point, I know they have like a cultural walk.
Hmm.
They have tried to do things, but it is not going to be the same as getting off the cruise ship in like Cozumel and going on a ruins tour, right?
Yeah.
That's not what this is. This is
Yeah.
really like a beach experience.
And if you're not a beach person, and I don't consider myself a beach person, but I do love the private islands, at least through lunch. Like I don't mind going in the morning and enjoying, the water and the sand and everything. But if you're not a beach person and this is where you stop, you're really kind of stuck. Like your choice is I'm going to go to the beach and not really enjoy myself, or I'm going to stay on the ship and do whatever's available on the ship. But a lot of these ships, for the most part, like you said, especially with Disney, the crew is all on the beach.
Right.
So the activities on board are going to be kind of pared back. It almost pushes you to go out there to the beach. So if that's not really your thing, to be on the beach all day long, it might just be a wasted day on your itinerary.
Yeah, and I will point out I've been to Castaway Cay like obviously over a dozen times. Um, there was the one sailing we had during the hurricane where we tried to dock there and we couldn't, but we returned later in the sailing, so we didn't miss it. Um, there was one sailing I was on. We were able to get off the ship. The weather was pretty nice, but you could see that it was getting bad quickly. So we
Yeah.
had an early lunch, and then there was this massive thunderstorm, and they evacuated, the island. And I will say that when they did that, the crew, especially the cruise director and the entertainment staff, were very quick to get us activities on the ship that were not planned. So right
Yeah.
away, there was some like amazing first run movie that they put up in the theater, that
Yeah.
wasn't supposed to happen. They started running like game shows and other stuff on the ship that really wouldn't have happened. So if for some reason you do have to, it does rain heavily where you really can't be out there. And I mean, I've also been on sailings where it's rained and people have stayed. But this
Yeah.
was like a really bad thunderstorm. They will accommodate the schedule to try to boost up what's going on the ship.
Yeah. And that's potentially one of the downsides of some of the private islands. I mean, we've been on the islands where we've gotten caught in the rain and had to go back early. We've been on an island where the wind was really bad, so they couldn't put umbrellas up, which,
Right.
For, ghostly pale people like myself, that's not the most ideal environment. So,
I did
the
find
weather,
shade. I did.
you found it. You were good.
I found like, two seats in the shade, but yes.
But yeah, that's a very real consideration, because if you've booked an excursion through the ship, 8 times out of 10, regardless of the weather, you'll still be able to go, you'll still be able to do something. But if your plan is to go and sit in the sand and enjoy the beach, and the weather's bad, it's not happening.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So you mentioned the barbecues and the food. How is the food on the private islands? Is it better than what's on the ship? Am I going to enjoy it?
I mean, I'd say the quality's similar. It's usually, something like a buffet, um, barbecue, lots of options. You'll find something that you like. I enjoy the food on all of the private destinations I have been to. I've found the food to be good. Typically with these destinations, if you have a drink package on the ship, it translates to the island. So
Yeah.
you can, get drinks as part of your package if you have a package and if you're on a sailing that has them. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I have found the food to be good. Do Do you agree?
I do. And I think in some instances, I really like the food. Virgin Voyages does an amazing job with the food. And again, it's up to your personal taste. They do a very good job of incorporating the Bahamian flavors in their beach cuisine, which I know for some people is an absolute no. Like, I'm not doing it. But I think the food that Virgin does at Bimini is really, really outstanding. And MSC, not even that it was food that I ate. I thought there was a great variety with like the jerk fish and the jerk chicken, and like Disney, which we didn't even mention on Disney, but they have Serenity Bay, which is the private adult side of the beach, but they have like steak and stuff on their buffet.
Yeah, and Serenity Bay is on both Castaway and Lighthouse Point. Lighthouse Point was a little bit different because it was adjacent to the family beach, as opposed to on Castaway. It's really a very separate area. But yeah, I think the food has been very good. Lots of options. You mentioned Ocean Cay. I particularly thought they had like a really good selection of salads and stuff.
Yeah.
In addition to like the jerk chicken and jerk fish.
Yeah. I also like especially with Royal Caribbean, because at Royal Caribbean, if you are on the adult side of the beach, the Hideaway Bay area, or Hideaway Beach area, the food is different. There's some of the same things, but there's also a few more grown up things. Like some of the pizzas that they do there are very sophisticated pizzas. They do coconut shrimp. They do ceviche. So the flavors are going to translate to the general audience. Like you're going to get burgers and hot dogs, but they understand that it's grown-ups here and maybe they do want something a little different.
Right. And that part of the beach, which is pretty new, is something that you book in advance and pay an extra fee for.
Yeah.
But yeah. I remember having ceviche. It was very good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we absolutely love the beach club on, Perfect Day, CocoCay. Even my grandchildren. So they do like a surf and turf thing, but they start you with like chilled shrimp and salads and stuff. My grandkids loved it. They loved the variety of foods. They thought that was really awesome. And we just saw on MSC for a slight upcharge, and most of the food is free on the private island. Most of it is, exactly what you would expect on the ship. You don't have to pay for anything, but a couple of things did have an upcharge. And I know the lobster roll on MSC had a little bit of an upcharge. Sometimes the ice cream,
like the premium.
But yeah, I think the food is generally great. I also learned it even if it's a shared space, like you talked about with Celebrity and Bimini, our lunch experience with Celebrity was 100% different than with Virgin, because with Celebrity, lunch is like an excursion. It's an extra fee to pay for the lunch. Holland America and Carnival share Half Moon Cay, their private island. When Holland America is there, they offer lobster rolls. When Carnival cruises are there, they don't offer lobster rolls. So I think they definitely cater to the different audiences. I guess there's probably more families and stuff going with Carnival, so maybe not as much of a need or as much of a want for a lobster roll. But then Holland America, which skews older, there is something for a more sophisticated palate.
Right. And one of the things we haven't talked about yet is the shopping. So
yeah.
Typically there's, there is some shopping. There isn't like tons and tons of shopping. But I'll say I was really impressed with the shops at Ocean Cay.
Yeah, I love those shops.
Yeah, they had a big selection. They had a lot of like local type souvenirs. I know Disney has tried to do that with their little like miniature straw market. And on Lighthouse Point, they have kind of like a crafters area. But I wouldn't necessarily go to these places expecting to get the level of souvenirs that you might get if you were just going to visit the destination, right? There isn't as much.
No, it's definitely more limited. And I know Perfect Day has like the little cottages with the merchandise, but you can almost go from one cottage to the other and find very similar merchandise. So there's not a huge variety. Disney does a great job with branded merchandise. You can get all of your Castaway Cay or your Lookout Point, Lighthouse Point. There's so many ones, Disney. I just can't keep up. Um, but yeah, I love the little shop area at MSC. And the thing I think that I love most about it is it's not at the beach. Like you get off of the ship
Right,
and there's this
right.
whole little shopping district. But then when you're on the beach, you're on the beach. You're not there where people are in and out of the shops. You can hear cash registers. It's
Right.
totally excluded from that part of the island.
Right. And, just to a point, you're not going to you might get a souvenir, but I wouldn't go to these shops thinking you're going to stock up on the stuff you forgot at home, right? This is not,
Yeah, no.
you're not going to find Sephora or CVS
Yeah.
or any of those, maybe like a few little things. But these are mostly like souvenir branded merchandise, a little bit of local stuff, but, bring what you need.
Yeah. And I just, because we're talking about MSC's island, I just want to throw out the Lighthouse show. If you're there in the evening, that's kind of a must do. It's an activity that I haven't seen on any other private island. It takes you into the night. You can go on the beach. There's music. There's the lights on the lighthouse. And it's something different. It's something that not other private islands offer.
Right. And that's a point that we should mention with MSC is that they typically do spend more time at Ocean Key than a traditional private island day.
Yeah.
And so they do go into the evening. On occasion, there will be an overnight. So that is just like a little bit of a different experience.
Yeah. So what's next for cruise line private islands? Because it seems like everybody has something going on. Royal's got something, Celebrity or Carnival's got something. MSC has something. What are they doing moving forward?
So I think one of the things I'm most excited for is Royal Caribbean has a private, so it's not an island, it's like a private beach club. From what I know, it seems to be more like the paid excursion type thing versus like an included experience. But that's going to be at Nassau, which, as I mentioned, is one of like the most common cruise stops for anything going, into the Bahamas or Caribbean. And, a lot of people who cruise frequently like us have been to Nassau many, 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 many times. So to have this like private destination that doesn't involve you having to go to either a public beach or like a hotel I think that's just going to be a big game changer for Nassau visits on Royal Caribbean.
Yeah. And this is sort of the same direction that Carnival is going with Celebration Key. And I think it's the direction MSC is going to take with their new private island. I think it's not only good for the cruise lines because now instead of paying for a beach club excursion somewhere else, you're going to stay within the brand's private island. But I also like that you know what you're going to get. You know what to expect. If you get off the ship at Royal Caribbean and you're now going to this beach club experience kind of a thing, you sort of have a blueprint for that because you've been to Perfect Day. Maybe you've paid for the beach club there at Perfect Day. You kind of know what you can get. Whereas some of the beach excursions, if you haven't been to Nassau a dozen times, you don't know. You're signing up for an excursion and you're really hoping for the best, but you might get there and they don't have enough chairs or they don't have umbrellas. So I like that they're doing it, and I know they're doing it because it's good for them. It's financially good for them. It makes sense. But I think it's good for somebody who pays for a Royal Caribbean experience or a Carnival cruise experience to know that's the experience they're going to have when they get off the ship.
Royal Caribbean also, and I don't have a whole lot of details on this, but I do know that they are, I think, taking over the Costa Maya cruise port.
Yeah.
And creating a private experience there.
Yeah. Is that Perfect Day, Cozumel? I can't even remember what they're going to call it or something. But yeah, I think it's brilliant. I think it's a brilliant plan for them.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see how that, experience works out. Because I mean, obviously that's Costa Maya is not even an island. That's, on the Mexican coast. But yeah, it seems like this is the direction a lot of these cruise lines are going. It's a huge differentiating factor, I think, when you're looking at itineraries, because, if you want to go to Castaway Cay, there is one cruise line you can take to go to Castaway Cay.
Yeah.
If you want to go to Cozumel, you have choices.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's great. I think it's a great idea. And again, I like that if I'm on a Disney cruise and I get off on a Disney private island, I know what I can expect. I know what my experience is going to be like. So I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have been to any of these cruise line private islands, tell us what your experience has been like. Just leave us a message in the comments. If there's stuff on the private islands that you'd like to see that you haven't seen yet, leave us that comment too, because we would absolutely love to know the things that you would like to see in a private island, because we're up to that kind of chat and conversation at any time also. All right, we have a couple of questions to address that came in from prior episodes. So the big one, got a lot of questions about Disneyland versus Disney World. What are the cost differences when it comes to Disneyland versus Disney World?
I mean, it's a great question. I find them to be fairly comparable in terms of price. Yeah. So, they're not the exact same price. And, it's going to vary based upon the time of year and what events are going on and demand and all of that. Like we mentioned in the episode, Disneyland doesn't necessarily have like a true value resort on property, but there are so many walkable resorts at varying price ranges that you can get that experience. Food's going to be similar. So I would say generally price, we didn't talk price last episode, and that's really because I don't find price to be a differentiating factor between these two.
Yeah, I think they're very similar. And in trips that I've priced, they're very similar. And in my head, I always think, well, Disney World is just naturally going to be more expensive because you're going to go to 4 parks, or you're going to do more stuff. But I know for my own clients, people that are going to Disneyland, there may not be 4 parks out there, but they're still going to spend 4 or 5 days in the theme parks.
Right.
So really, when it comes to cost, I mean, the price of hotels is very similar. The food is definitely very similar. So I don't know that there's that much of a difference when it comes, except Disneyland, maybe you can customize it if you just want to do a quick weekend, but you can still do a quick weekend at Disney World. So
you can go for less time and you can stay maybe at at more options for off-property resorts.
Yeah.
But
and somebody asked about Disneyland, if they still have a Maxi Pass or Max Pass or something like it. I don't know anything about this. I'm going to be honest. I've heard of them, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. So before the pandemic, which, we always think pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, Disneyland had something called the Max Pass. So both parks had Fast Pass. That was the system forever. It evolved over time. It went from going to the machine to booking it online, but both had that system pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. Disneyland, unlike Disney World, had a paid upgrade to that system called Max Pass. And that system allowed you to book your Fast Passes, that day. You could book more. It was a premium experience.
Mm-hmm.
So after the pandemic, Disney World and Disneyland both got rid of the Fast Pass system and replaced the system with a paid upgrade, originally called Genie Plus and now called Lightning Lane Multipass, with a few little differences. But those are both paid upgrades. So with that, Max Pass, which was a paid upgrade, is no longer. So it's just the Lightning Lane Multipass. Or for specific rides, there's the Lightning Lane Individual. So you want to go on Radiator Springs Racers and you want to do that without waiting in line, you pay for the individual pass.
Are they worthwhile investments at both parks, do you think?
I think so. Personally, I think so. Are you talking about the individuals or are you talking about the multi-pass?
The multi-passes.
Yeah, I think so personally. Maybe if you were someone who went frequently and, were open to kind of whatever rides you don't have crazy lines. If you're with little kids and most of those rides don't have lightning lanes or don't have very long waits, maybe not. But if you were, hoping to go on some of the more popular rides, then yes.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you've invested so much money in this vacation and you want to make the most of the time that you have there and see as much as you can. I definitely think it's a valuable tool when you go, definitely worth the investment. In the news today, by the time this episode airs, we will be in the era of Real ID. Maybe, fingers crossed, we don't know. How is it going up by you, Jodi?
So I just flew this past weekend, and there are reminders all over the airport. You need a real ID to fly, or a passport. So, they're definitely. I've heard. So I've had a real ID since 2019, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't get the reminder, but I know I've heard from people who, they're showing up with their regular driver's license, and TSA is reminding them, hey, this is not going to be valid in a couple weeks. I know appointments are a little harder to come by. I will say every state is different, but in Massachusetts, you don't walk out of the RMV with your license. You walk out with like a temporary thing. You need that real license. So it isn't just a matter of popping into the RMV and getting your real ID. You need, you need to have the physical license. Or the passport. If you haven't gotten it, if you don't have an appointment, even if you don't have a flight coming up, I would highly recommend that you get on that.
Yeah, in New Jersey, appointments are still non-existent. If you log on past 7 a.m, you're not going to get them. They do release some every morning at 7 o'clock, but right now, to get a real ID, even if you're online at 7 a.m. to book these appointments, the appointments are now end of June, beginning of July. So it's going to be past the date. I will say this though. One of our local news reporters, because this is on the news here every single day, went to Philadelphia and spoke with a TSA agent and threw all kinds of confusion in the mix, not only for me, but I'm sure for other people, by basically saying, if you don't have a passport or a real ID, show up at the airport with all of your documentation, bring a utility bill, bring everything that you can to prove who you are. It will delay you getting through security, but they'll still get you through security. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that now will discourage people from trying to get the real ID because it's not as necessary as we've been led to believe. They also said you want to show up 30 minutes earlier than you've been showing up. So if you're there 2 hours for a domestic flight, get there 2.5 hours. That kind of says to me that I also need to show up 2.5 hours early, whether I have a real ID or not. So I'm real interested to see how this plays out and what kind of grace they're going to give to people that have flights booked that don't have real ID because they can't get appointments.
Right. Yeah, it's, it'll definitely be interesting. And when you were saying that with all that documentation, I mean, for anyone who's listening, like I would definitely dissuade you from like going that route if you can, because I mean, I try to leave like things like that at home, right? You don't want to have to be like worrying about packing and then like, do I have all the documentation I need? Traveling with a birth certificate that you might potentially lose. I would just kind of err on the side of getting the real ID. It's one license. It has the star on it showing that it is a real ID. But that's just, less to keep track of and less to potentially lose or misplace.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to our episode about private islands on cruise ships. We are so excited next week to talk about summer road trips. We know that this is peak road trip season we're going into, and Anna has done so many road trips. She is definitely the expert here. As always, we would ask if you would subscribe to us wherever you're listening to this, whether it be YouTube or your favorite podcast network. And please leave us a review. It helps a ton with other people finding the podcast. And also, if you have any questions, you can always email us or join our Facebook group, which is completely free, where we talk about the episodes and anything coming up. We can answer any questions. So please do all of that. Thank you so much.